Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to the organizers for having invited me to facilitate this session on procurement and supply chain. Today we have a really good and interesting panel. We have Mr. Rick Nojenga, who is Executive Director of the Union for Ethical Biotrade, followed by Mr. Wijnand, sorry, Brouwer, Deputy Director of CREM, Mr. Jankes Wies, who you've heard earlier this morning, who is the Global Director of Sustainable Sourcing at Unilever, and Ms. Kirsten Sims, who is Good Business Journey Analyst at Woolworths. By the way, that's a really nice title you have. So I've been asked to provide an initial introduction to the issue of procurement supply chain from the biodiversity perspective. I will use a bit the example of the thinking that we've been doing at the Responsible Ecosystem Sourcing Platform to be able, hopefully, to give some food for thought for the presentations and for the panel discussion that we'll have later on. So really quickly, as I think most of you don't know, RESP, Responsible Ecosystem Sourcing Platform, was established in 2013. And it was established with a mission to take collective action towards promoting net positive impacts through the sustainable use of natural capital. We work with 3 industries, fashion, cosmetics, and jewelry. And at the moment, we have 41 members, of which 36 are companies and 5 are institutions, mostly research institutions and think tanks. So what I'm going to start is by providing you kind of like a general glance of how we at RESP see the value chain when it's linked to natural capital. So as was already mentioned earlier today, there's the different tiers. We have the consumers, the retailers, the brands, the transformation, the processing processes, and the producers. And we have here the little trees that represent ecosystem services. And as you know, throughout the value chain, ecosystem services provide a series of goods and services to each of the actors in the supply chain, be it from biodiversity or through minerals, through energy, through fossil fuels. At the same time, each of the points of the value chain have specific emissions, whether it's emissions of the production processes, of the waste being produced, and that could be either going back to the ground or emitted to the air. Luckily, natural capital has a regeneration potential, so we also consider that within the formula of the different flows. And finally, what we see is that in the traditional value chain, you see an increase of value added as you go up the value chain. In economic terms, many of the times you see the biggest margins and the biggest profits being correlated to the amount of perceived added value. Having given this kind of general overview of how we see a value chain, here are 2 examples of more elaborate mappings of value chains that we work at RESP. On the left-hand side, you see the reptile skins, typical value chain, supply chain. On the right, you see the one for wool. Basically, what this means is that even though you do or you can have a general idea of the definition of a value chain, every value chain is quite different one to the other. For this reason, in RESP and the membership have decided to focus on a number of areas where we believe that value chains are similar with regards to the overall material categories. So in this case, RESP focuses on colored gemstones for jewelry, on natural ingredients for cosmetics and fragrance, and then we have reptile skins and wool fibers with regards to the fashion industry. But going into that, you might think, well, you know, if you need to divide the value chains to their minimum denominator, then it's quite difficult to advance on the systemic changes that we need. There was a lot of discussion this morning about the need for collaboration, the need for a bigger picture, and the systemic changes to really drive a change with regards to biodiversity, sustainable use, and conservation. So how do we then tackle that? After about a year and a half of discussions within RESP, there's actually 5 work streams where RESP members thought that it was possible to collaborate on a pre-competitive level. So that means that in these 5 areas, companies see that there is shared opportunities to share information, to share data on the production systems, talking about what is best practice, and sharing that across the industry. This is not seen as a competitive advantage of one company versus the other. In regards to, you can't really manage what you don't measure. This is seriously taken at RESP, and clearly impact and monitoring indicators and systems and reporting systems are something that there is a willingness to share. Traceability. A number of people earlier this morning did mention the importance of traceability, and these industries see that traceability should be something that can provide a level playing field. So, of course, there's some traceability initiatives right now that can provide a certain comparative advantage with regards to communication or marketing for a certain number of companies. But overall, if we are to advance with regards to management and sustainable use, traceability is an aspect. Consumption. And consumption is really understanding the risks and opportunities related to this. And finally, with regards to the access of information and information systems that provide this data to help inform decision making. And clearly, capacity building and education across the value chain, which most of the time is shared by many competitors. So in looking at that and trying to visualize how that then is reflected in the value chain, we see that at least in the case of RESP, our focus on the production systems is really at the production, the first early stages of the supply chain, whereas as was noted by the presentation for Caring, I think, we see that most of the land's use and transformation impacts are at this stage. So what do we try to do with production systems? Well, first of all, is to help in resource efficiency, in eliminating these emissions and helping regenerate the power of nature so that it acts as a more effective system. As an example of the type of production systems works that we're undertaking, for instance, in Indonesia, we're bringing together the cosmetics industry and the fashion industry to work on landscape management in and around palm oil, where agroforestry systems help in increasing the yields and the effective efficiency of these plantations. And at the same time, for those of you that might not know it, the workers of plant oil plantations, the palm oil plantations, are actually the ones that harvest and collect skins from pythons. So there is really a good opportunity of two industries coming together to work on a landscape management level. Another example is Patagonia in grasslands, where sheep production is collaborating with wild collectors and harvesters of guanaco, which is a South American native camelid, and also looking at how these two kind of industries can work together in the restoration and maintenance of grasslands. There's a lot of other examples of how these inter-industry efforts can help in going from species management to more of a broader landscape management within the value chain. With regards to impact and monitoring, there was a whole session on valuation, and clearly one of the big issues that we need to solve at this point is to be able to put quantifiable indicators. and not only in economic terms, but starting really from indicators that can help us monitor and assess impact in a quantifiable and measurable way. In this case, for instance, two of the projects that are being undertaken is the development of ecosystem-level life cycle assessment type indicators to help in better improving these life cycle assessment methods. At the species level, it's more related to, for instance, non-detriment findings, which is a tool which is widely used by the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. Finally, in the case of traceability, what we aim to do is to actually make the natural capital more visible throughout the supply chain. And finally, well, one of the examples that we have is the work we're undertaking around the traceability of the reptile skins industry, where we actually hope to prove that traceability going all the way back, at least to the ecoregion, is feasible. In this case, what we're doing is we're actually undertaking a unique identifier, which is like a fingerprint of reptile skins, and through an algorithm, we're able to track the skin from the final product, whether it's a watch bracelet or a bag, into the original skin that it came from. And here are the different processes of the supply chain. What is important here is that traceability is one of the most important issues to be able to actually manage effectively all of these issues around sustainable use of biodiversity. And secondly, traceability is feasible. It can be done. Technology is not a limitation. And there's always economic options that are linked to the added value that this increases. So again, I hope that this provides some initial food for thought for the discussions. And before I pass to the first presentation, I have been asked by the organizers to, they will, over the course of the session, provide you, the audience, with a number of questions. I don't know if the first question can be put already up there. So basically, the organizers are asking if you could respond to those questions very quickly, either by sending an SMS to the number there, or by accessing the website. And in the website, you'll see polls. If you link to the polls and you answer that first question, and we'll have two other questions throughout the session, and we'll also be able to share the responses with you. Okay? So with that, I'll give the floor to Mr. Rick Longenga, Executive Director of the Union for Ethical Biotrade.